To deploy camera traps at schools or in youth programs, and how to integrate that citizen science in the classroom. So we've been doing this now for a while, and we have some pictures coming in. If you are a teacher in North Carolina, you can get a continuing education unit requirement for participating in this program, and part of this requirement is to submit pictures. So here I'm going to show you some of the great school pictures that we've got so far. So this is from Wake County, right here around Raleigh, Ravenscroft, and you can see that there's students assessing their habitat and using this information to try to figure out what critters they think might be on the camera trap. They're also investigating mammals before they set up their camera trap. Here we have some students from Hendersonville Elementary, and you can see they use this method that a lot of scientists use, where you actually throw out, what we usually use as a quadrat, or it's like a square, but they used a hula hoop, and you look really intensely in that area for any signs of life, and they're using this to assess the habitat of their school. And here you can see they've made a dot plot, which is the predictions of the types of species they thought they would find on their camera traps. And they're exploring e-mammal photos. And then here we have, out in the west, Jacobs Fork Middle School. And you can see how these school habitats differ a lot too. And their dot plot, as well as students uploading their photos. So we have some photos to show you tonight as well. But before we get into the photos, we're going to take some time now to talk to Rachel and Preston about their experiences working in the Candid Critters program. So you guys have done some similar things that they've done on these photos. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to participate in Candid Critters as a teacher and as a student?
Well, as a teacher, it's been amazing to work with the program because it really has given my kids the opportunity to connect with the environment around them. Unfortunately, in science, we don't get as much time outside, and our Candid Critters program allows us to do that, which I really like as a teacher.
I'd have to agree. I enjoy going outside because normally we're stuck inside all day, especially with having, for me, science at the end. When the chance we do get to go outside, it really kind of like puts the bow on the package at being the last class.
Yeah, and that's actually what we hear from a lot of teachers, even all over the world. I work with kids from really rural parts in India, and they tell me going outside is a huge deal, and I'm always surprised to hear that. But kids everywhere like to go outside. And why don't you guys tell me about what animals you've seen so far in your camera traps?
So far, with a couple of our deployments, we've seen deer, lots of deer. Mm-hmm. We've also seen coyote, which was a big surprise. And we've seen foxes and rabbits. We saw one rabbit. We're waiting for an opossum, though, because we know they're out there based on data that we have from last year. We're just waiting for them to show up this year.
And can you tell me what it's like to see the photos and view the photos as opposed to just hearing about the wildlife from your teacher?
Well, since we put the cameras out, we get to see like the beginning and how like the pictures that come through the cameras versus just having Miss Palmentier stand in front of the classroom and, all right, this was a picture from the woods, this was a deer. Like, so it's fun to kind of see it go through the different stages and actually see the animals, then just look at pictures that could be in California, not even in North Carolina, see pictures actually where we live.
Were you really surprised by the animals you had at your school?
Kind of. I mean, living near the woods, I know we have a lot of deer, but the coyote really surprised me because I did not realize we had any of those.
Yeah, coyotes are actually newer to North Carolina in general. They've only been here for about 30 years, but they're all over the state now. So coyotes are actually a focus of Candid Critters. We're trying to understand exactly where they live in the state and how close they're getting to humans. And so Rachel, what do you think that students get out of Candid Critters that maybe they don't get out of other types of classroom activities?
I think the biggest thing with Candid Critters for the students is knowing that they're working with scientists such as you here at the museum. Not only does it connect the standards, but it makes them feel like they are doing something bigger than just, okay, Miss P is making us do this lab. No. This is for the science museum.
The scientists are making them
The
do the
scientists are making them do it. But it's more that they're connected to it. And when you tell them that they're stored in the Smithsonian, it completely blows their mind. There's things that they have done is going to be there for researchers in the future as well.
And what about you? How does it differ from your regular classes?
Well, we do a lot of collaboration to begin with in our classes, but being able to actually go outside and hear about them being stored in the Smithsonian, actually see our pictures that we've worked hard for getting put somewhere that actually more than just our classroom can view it. It's really hard to like wrap your brain around it because you don't truly understand what they're actually being used for.
Yeah, and the cool thing about having citizen scientists is that we're able to access a lot of land that we normally couldn't access. So scientists frequently do their work in protected areas because we can't go to people's yards. We don't have permission, and to gather all those permissions would be really difficult. So working on schools and people's yards is really amazing from a scientific perspective as well. We appreciate all of your contributions and hard work. What has been the greatest challenge with Candid Critters in the classroom?
For us, it would probably be our terrain. So our school has a variety of hills. There's even one that's the gully by the soccer field. We call it the gully. Going down has been tricky. We've also noticed that we have lots of creeks and holes that are covered by leaves. So there have been plenty of times where Preston has caught me or we've caught other students and we've had to help each other go across the creek. It's been an adventure, but it's like Preston said earlier, it's the collaboration part that's awesome because you really are working on real world problems. How do we actually access this point? That's probably the most difficult part, but it's also really fun at the same time.
What about you? What's your favorite part? Or what's your greatest challenge? Sorry. What's your favorite part?
I'd have to agree with it. It's getting around the woods because the leaves, especially when they get wet, if it's been raining, depending on when we go out, it can be really, really slick. And if you don't make the best shoe decision, that can make or break how it goes. Because we have lots of creeks that run through. Sometimes they're frozen. Sometimes they actually have water moving through them. And they have moss and other stuff growing on it. So sometimes it can be really slick, even if there's not any leaves. And we have lots of trees and low-hanging branches. So, like, every time you go out, it could be a different story.
Yeah, I'm always surprised actually when I go to the schools, and sometimes I'll set up camera traps at schools, and it's really different even just from being like on the field until you get into that forest. And I remember one classroom, they went outside and the kids said it's so peaceful out here. They had no idea that their schoolyard was so peaceful. And this is my last question. I almost asked you this, but what have you enjoyed most about Candid Critters for both of you?
I have really enjoyed actually, I have two things. The first thing is seeing what's on the school grounds. We live in a high populated area with people, and it was very interesting for me to see the amount of foxes or to see the coyote show up multiple times. I did not think that with as populated as we are, that we would get those. And then the other part that I like is I love watching my students grow and change. I've been doing the program now, working with the camera traps for 2 years, and I really have seen love for science grow with a lot of my students because of it. So that would be probably number one why I like it.
That's great. And I love hearing those stories too. What about you?
It's probably when we're sitting in class and she's showing us pictures and everyone's like, wow, that's actually in my backyard.
Yeah.
Because you understand what animals are back out that live in your backyard, but during the day, the animals change. And like when we're outside, which we do during class change, the animals tend not to come out because there's people around that would scare them off. So you don't really see the animals unless it's completely undisturbed, what you get with the cameras.
Yeah, even myself as a wildlife biologist, most of the animals I see on the camera traps, I've never seen in real life. I've only seen a coyote once, and that was in Yellowstone National Park. So a lot of these animals are a surprise to me too. Well, thank you very much, and I'm sure the viewers out there will probably have some additional questions for you guys. So hope you'll stick around, and hopefully we'll get some more questions out of them. But thank you very much for talking about your experiences. So now we're going to transition and talk about the last two lesson plans more in detail. And just to catch everyone up to speed, if you're a teacher of grades 5 through 8, the first thing you want to do is the surveys for your classroom. And if you want to get a continuing education unit credit for this, you can still do this. Just go to our website and sign up for it. There's plenty of time. The materials are all due June 18th. Our first webinar, we went over lessons plans 1, 2, and 3, and we did this for a camera trap deployment in February. We waited 3 weeks of time, and some of you have already uploaded your photos. So if you haven't uploaded your photos, go ahead and do so as soon as you get the photos back. And that covers lessons plans 4. And lesson plan 5 is about the food chains and food webs that come from the photos. Today, we're going to talk about lesson plan 6, which is an optional lesson plan, but it really works with the data. So I'm biased as a scientist, and I'm going to encourage you to do it with your students. And I'll teach you how to get your data today about for using that for lesson plan 6. And lesson plan 7 has to do with evaluating your habitat again, but a little bit different angle. So like I said, the pictures have started to come in. I'm going to show you a couple from Hendersonville Elementary. So of course, like you guys said, deer, we have a lot of deer on schools, and that's probably your number one animal, right?
Oh yeah, we have deer everywhere. We get it on every single deployment almost.
Yeah, so a lot of deer photos we're getting, a lot of nice ones too. And then this photo, do you guys know what this picture is?
Not right off the top of my head. Kind of looks like a little blob with an eye.
This was actually tough for me to identify at first too, and I had to send it around to the group. And I think it's because I'm not used to seeing this animal at night. And if you look at the time, it's actually early in the morning, so I think it was probably transitioning from nighttime flash to daytime. But this actually turned out to be a woodchuck. And then here we have another fun animal that we don't see all that much. This is a skunk from Western North Carolina. And you were saying you never had a skunk on your camera trap, right?
No, we've never seen a skunk. I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, the skunks, we're on the edge of their range here in Raleigh, so we hardly ever get them on camera traps here in Raleigh. So this was a fun find. So get those photos uploaded. And once you review your deployments, we review your deployments. So remember, the students identify the animals, and because these are used for real science, we go over every single photo, and we change any identifications that were incorrect. So I can't remember what the woodchuck was called. I think it was an unknown animal, but we were able to identify it, so we changed that identification. And if you want to make sure that you get an email when we are finished identifying all of your animals, you can sign up for these email notifications. So I'm going to show you on my computer how you can do that on the email website. So you want to make sure that you are logged in. So here you can see my name here, and you're going to click on Edit Profile. You're going to click on your name, and then the drop box will pop up. And then you're going to scroll down, and you can see a section here that says Volunteer Email Notification, and you want to make sure that this is checked. If it's not checked, go ahead and check it, but make sure you save your changes. So then whenever we review a deployment and it goes into the repository, that's where the data and the photos are saved forever, you will get an alert, and you can just access your deployment information just by clicking the link in that email. But say you didn't have that checked or you lost your email, you can also get your deployment information this way. So if you go again and click on your username and click on Deployment Summary, you will get a page of all of the deployments that you have done thus far. And because I've been in this program for a long time, I have hundreds of deployments. Let's see if it loads. You will probably have a lot less. There you go. So here it tells you all of my summary stats. And if you scroll all the way down, you will have your deployments here. And again, you'll probably only have one or maybe a few at this point. And I'm going to show you this one, East Cary. It's a school here in Wake County as an example. You'll click on that deployment, and then here is the summary information for that deployment. And this is the information that you are going to need for lesson plan 6. So you can either copy this information to the whiteboard, or you can print this information out for the students, but they will need the species they detected and the number of species, or the number of detections per species, as well as the days the camera trap was run. And the reason why we need this information is so that we can calculate something called detection rate. And this is something that actually we really use. So I have a graph to show you coming up of an actual publication that I'm submitting to a journal that uses detection rate. And so you can assign your class groups if you have more than one species, and have each group calculate the detection rate for the different species. And what they're going to do is take the number of times that that animal shows up on the camera trap. So here we have an example for deer. In this example, there are 40 detections of deer, and you take the number of days that the camera trap was run. So this person pulled their camera trap a little too short and only did it for 20 days instead of 21. But that gives us a nice even number for approximately 2 deer per day. And the reason why we want to have this standardized measure is so your students, and why we scientists do it, can make comparisons across larger areas. So remember, your deployment is just one of many across the state. And you might have a unique area at your school where you either get a lot of wildlife or no wildlife, or maybe it's right on point. So what we want the students doing then is to compare these detection rates to data across the state. And they can do this by visiting our website. If you go to the home page, our website has a live map on it. So it's updated every single night. If you just click on Get Started, the first layer is for white-tailed deer. So you can choose a county, click on it, and it will show you the last favorite picture from that county, and it will give you the detection rate of 3 species: deer, coyote, and bear. The colors represent the detection rate. So here you can see in the bottom corner there is darker colors for higher detections and lighter colors for no detections. And you can see we still have some counties that have not been sampled yet. So if you want to get your Candid Critters t-shirt, recommend some friends in these counties and get 3 people to sign up, and we can send you a t-shirt. So here students can then compare their camera trap data to the county. You can also see how many camera traps have been run too. So some of these counties which are really dark in color, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's been a lot of camera trapping done at that site. It's just the detection rate of that species. So here you can see we only have 4 camera traps done, whereas I know on the coast, like Hyde County here, we have a lot more camera traps run, like 63. So these data are going to be more representative of that county. And then if you click on the layer button over here, you can see you can change it to different animals. So here are coyotes across the state. Looks like there's a little bit higher detections more in the western part of the state, which is kind of surprising. And I do know, I remember this because I camera trapped on the East Coast. There are a lot on the East Coast as well. And then finally, we also have bear. Now bear are only found in western and eastern North Carolina, but you can see it looks like these areas haven't been sampled, but actually the bear detection rate is just really small in this area compared to the East Coast. And I don't know if you guys know this, but eastern North Carolina actually has the highest density of black bear in the whole entire world. So
wow.
you can get that from this map. So the idea is to get students to look at their data and really compare it across the state and to see what their data mean and how their camera trap locations compare. And like I said, I use detection rate in my research. So here is a graph from the publication that I'm working on. I'm working on resubmitting it. And in this graph, I showed it in webinar 1, but you can see that we have the detection rate of animals found in schools in North Carolina, and that's in green. And I compared it to the detection rate of another citizen science project we ran in Umstead State Park, which is a state park here in Raleigh, and those are the orange bars. And what you can see is that for every animal except for deer and flying squirrel, we actually have higher detection rates of all those other mammals. So like you said, you were surprised to see the coyote, and we're surprised to see coyotes in higher detection rates at schoolyards than in this state park. So pretty surprising for the scientists. As an extension on this math homework, or on this math lesson plan, we also have homework that again uses real data. So here we have camera trap data from across the triangle area, and we chose 2 different groups. We have suburban habitat and wild habitat. In the original study, we also had ex-urban habitat and rural habitat. They're just different zones of development. And we have a sample graph here for students to answer questions about with gray fox and red fox. But we also asked the students to calculate the detection rate of another species from the chart provided. And like the school habitat results, I think the students will be really surprised to see the detection rates, how wild animals compare to suburban animals. Then our last lesson plan of Candid Critters brings everything full circle. So now the students have looked at what species are at their school. They know how frequently they've been there with the detection rate. And now we're asking them to reflect upon their dot plots and see how their predictions held up to the reality of the camera trap. So did they find more species than they thought, or less species? What do you guys think with your camera traps? Was it more than you were expecting?
I definitely think more species for sure. Of course deer, but the amount that we're getting, the differentiation has been kind of...
I didn't really think about it going into it, so I'd have to say probably what I expect, except for deer. That was really, really high.
Yeah, so people are constantly surprised by the results. I just had one school contacted me, and they didn't get any animals on their camera trap. So maybe it's just by chance, or maybe there's something really going on in their school habitat that doesn't make it good for wildlife. So lesson 7 ties into standards about human impacts on Earth. And we want students, again, to go outside in their habitats and look around their schoolyard and see potential negative things that could harm wildlife and even people. So here we have our pollution probes worksheet. And to get your CU requirement, we are asking you to send a copy or a photo of this filled out, just one example filled out, to me to get credit. And students will go around their habitat and see if there's anything that could potentially be detrimental to wildlife and humans. So an example here, we have our bus exhaust fumes. If you let your cars idle, it can cause air pollution. And then students will also brainstorm ways, even if you do get a lot of wildlife, there might be certain species like the skunk that you want to attract that you don't have yet. Or maybe like you notice that you have a lot of deer but not a lot of other animals. So the idea is to get students talking about how they can potentially improve habitat for wildlife in the future. And with that, so make sure that you get all of the CU requirements in before June 18th. And again, if you want to still start camera trapping in your classroom, there's still time to do a full 3-week deployment. So go ahead to our website and sign up. And now we're going to check the website and see if we have any questions. Do you know if we got any questions?
We do.
Okay, it looks like we have some questions.
From Leslie, I think.
Okay, Leslie asked, is it okay to upload the pictures during the 3-week deployment? I might ask you to submit a clarifying question, because I'm not quite sure what is meant by during the deployment. So what we ask you to do, our protocol, is to leave the deployment there for 3 weeks, so don't touch the camera trap at all. And this is actually really tempting for kids to go. I actually see this on your deployments where kids know where the camera trap is, and then they go and check the camera trap. There's no need to check the camera trap during that 3-week time. You just want to let it sit there. And we actually think that will be better for data collection because then if animals are sensitive to humans for some reason, then visiting the camera trap a lot would maybe make some animals not want to go to that site. So leave the camera trap there for 3 weeks, forget it's there, and then get the photos off the camera trap and upload your photos after the 3 weeks. If for some reason you have a scheduling conflict and you can't get it exactly at 3 weeks, then let the camera trap run a little bit longer. Just don't let it run shorter. Shorter is worse for data, longer is better. So I hope that answers your question. It looks like we have another question. Oh, this might be a good one for you. Do you have any ideas for how to get students to think beyond litter? This is often their go-to problem. Is there an easy or fun way to get them some background info?
One thing you could do if you're feeling adventurous is actually, as a warm-up, create stations in your classroom before you even go outside. You could put different things in there besides litter. Maybe you put out little toy cars, or you put out a thing full of water, or you do have a litter station, and you're using that as your warm-up, your enter into your admit slip into the class for that day. And then have a class discussion about, okay, well, where can we see these outside, or these things that we might see? So that could be a fun way to get them engaged, to start thinking beyond, like you said, litter, because that is typically their go-to. You could try that.
Yeah, and I would also say don't underestimate the importance of litter. I know you wanted to go beyond litter, but plastic especially is a huge problem for our environment. Plastic it just breaks down. It doesn't ever go away. So a big problem that we're facing as a society is the breakdown of these plastics, which is causing microplastics. And this even has human health implications. Like, for example, a lot of face washes used to have plastic beads for to help refresh and exfoliate the skin. But these plastic beads were getting caught in water supplies and affecting, like I said, human and wildlife health. So again, if you want to get them to think deeper about litter, think about what happens to that litter if we don't pick it up, and what are the consequences of it. On the pollution probes worksheet, we do give some examples of some other things that might be affecting wildlife habitat. I know when I visited some schools, you can see treatments for their lawns, and some of those treatments might be okay, some of them might be harmful. I don't know, but that's something they can look into. I have seen schools that have had water treatment centers at their schools, so students might want to look into those investigations as well. But the pollution probes website or worksheet does have different levels of environmental issues like air, water, and soil. Do you have any thoughts for getting students to think past litter?
In the beginning of the year when we were studying water, we talked about point and non-point pollution sources. Mm-hmm. So they could always look at, okay, what's near my school? What point and non-point sources might I have that would actually relate to me?
Yeah, you can think about how water flows through their ecosystem. So that might require some investigative work on Google Maps or something like that. Okay, it looks like we have one more question. I haven't received a site deployment to use to upload my photos yet. I'm ready to upload pictures. What do I do? I already filled out the site request on Candid Critters website. Thank you, Jennifer, for asking. So we are going through some transitions right now. Our volunteer coordinator recently left for another position, so we might be a little bit slower than normal. So if you submitted a site request form, and this is found on the volunteer resources on the Candid Critters website, it's the very first link, fill that out. If it's been more than a couple of days, then you can still email the Candid Critters email address, or you can email me and I'll check your site deployment and to see what has been going on. But it might just take either a tweaks from us, maybe something happened on our end that we need to fix. Another thing is with the program, I would give it a few seconds for the deployment to load. That happens to even to us, where sometimes you have to click it multiple times and then the deployment will load even after it's been created. So try that first, but if you're still not seeing it even though it's been a few days, then shoot us an email.
Nothing on Facebook.
Okay, nothing on Facebook. And so I think that's our last question. And thank you very much for being here. I
Well, thank
enjoyed
you for having
talking
us.
with you this evening. And feel free to email us your questions if you have anything else you'd like to add. Thank you.